So he sets up this challenge. Each one of them is going to build this altar, and the one who can pray their God down in fire wins. Simple contest. Prophets of Baal pray, and they pray, and they pray. And actually, some of the wording that they didn't put into here is they said, well, Elijah taunts them and says, well, maybe you need to just shout a little louder. Maybe God can't hear you. Maybe he's away on vacation. Maybe he's sleeping. Maybe he's on the toilet. None of that happens. None of it helps. And then Elijah has his altar doused with water. That's a good burning agent, right? Right, Connor? Every time you're building a scout fire, you douse it with water so it'll burn better, right? Nah. Yeah, there's some special fire water you can put on fires that makes it go really good. Elijah fixes this. He's raised the odds even worse. It's 1,000,000,000 to 1 odds that Elijah is going to fail. Elijah just simply prays. Doesn't raise his voice. Doesn't scream and shout. Doesn't cut himself so that his God will take notice. He just simply asks God to light the fire and accept the sacrifice. Whew! It's gone. Now that would get your attention, right? You would think. And all the people bow down and say, this is the winner. We're not worthy, right? How long does that last? Till they get home. Kind of like going to a football game where the other side wins. Oh, man, what a good game. Then you get home, you're on to the next project, the next thing to do. Made absolutely no difference. How do I know that? Well, because they side right back with Ahab and Jezebel. She actually had more influence than this guy in the weird robe who could call down fire from heaven and ignite a green, wet wood in one prayer. In fact, she had so much influence that it even scared Elijah. Elijah takes off in the wilderness. In the end, though, it's Jezebel who loses. It's Ahab who loses. And they fulfill what comes to all kings where it's accounted to them, and they did evil in the sight of God. The other prophet is Hosea. Have you ever read Hosea? Kind of a neat prophet, neat story. Oftentimes, I use things like cell phones as props. Why would I do that? I used to tell kids, when I had a lot of kids in church, I used to tell a lot of kids' stories. And when I used to wear my robes and collar and all of that, I would tell the kids what the colors meant and what the robe meant and what the stole meant and what the change in the seasons meant. You know why? Now that I'm not doing that, I can tell you why. Because if I told the kids, the parents listened. The parents got it. Now, if I told the parents, they pretended not to hear, and very often they didn't. But if I told the kids, it was non-threatening, and then they could listen, and they could hear. An object lesson has that kind of effect, doesn't it? And the book of Hosea is an object lesson. Not that Hosea is doing, it's one that God is doing. He says, Hosea, here's the deal. I want you to go marry this woman over here. Now, that wasn't untypical. Arranged marriages were fairly typical at that time. It just happens that God is arranging this one. Now, here's the catch. The woman I want you to marry is a prostitute. Okay, God. What's the point in that? That doesn't sound good. Remember, we're not supposed to join ourselves with a prostitute. We're not supposed to engage in that. Those are all unclean things. So I don't care. This is the lesson. And he does that. And he says, and I want you to love her regardless. And Hosea does. Now, the whole point of the book of Hosea is that he loves Gomer. Not Gomer Pyle, but Gomer, his wife, the prostitute. And he loves her regardless of what she does. And he keeps calling her back to his single love. But she ignores it. She goes on and does what she wants to do. And God says, keep calling. Keep bidding her to come back. Keep loving her. Why? Any clue? How many of you think you know why? Yeah. The story ought to sound familiar. We're not Hosea. We're the other one. We're the one that prostitutes ourselves after all kinds of things. Money, power, success. All the things that this world has to offer, and we keep traveling along that road. And like Israel, we keep going our own way, and we don't listen to God. And so God cuts us off, right? And he just sends us away. He says, well, if you're not going to listen, that's it. No. That's the awesomeness of God. He continues to love us. He continues to care for us in spite of the fact that we're so disrespectful, we're so disobedient, we don't turn to him in love, we don't accept his love for ourselves. We don't act in faithfulness. And even when we get the lesson, tomorrow we forget it. And yet God keeps calling us back. God keeps loving us. Now that, Pete, is the definition of awesome. When that can happen. When we can be loved, even though we are so unlovable. Hosea continues to call the people of Israel back on God's behalf. Hosea's name, Hosea of Beri, means salvation. Salvation is come. Did it come in Hosea's lifetime? Yeah. Sometimes the prophet preaches it, and then it takes a while. Now, talk about faith. If you can continue to preach and have people walk away and people reject it time and time and time again, and you continue to preach it because you know that it's true, even though you don't see it at all, that's faith. Believing that which we cannot see. After all, you don't need faith to believe that which you can see, right? But Hosea had great faith. And his great faith wasn't based on, I hope this will happen. It was the kind of hope that says, I know this will happen. And it does. Not during Hosea's time. Not even a little bit later in Isaiah's time. We'll talk about that later. Not even in Micah's time, or Nehemiah, or Ezra. But then this guy named Jesus comes along. And he's announced by another Old Testament prophet called John, the one they called the baptizer. All of this starts coming together. Promises become fulfilled. If I had the time, I'd show you in slides a lot of the prophecies that Isaiah made. Here's a guy that lived hundreds of years before Jesus even existed, and yet he predicts all that Jesus is going to do. How does he know that?